That night, when my straight friend thought I was asleep, turned into one of the craziest and most exciting nights of my life, as he did something I would never have expected. Let me take you back to where it all started. It was one of those nights that felt suspended in time. The apartment was dim, save for the soft glow of my desk lamp in the corner and the faint blue light from the TV screen flickering in the living room. The rain outside had tapped a steady rhythm on the windows for hours, lulling the city into a hush, like everything had slowed down just enough to let me hear my own heartbeat. I was curled up on the couch, under the pretense of sleep, one arm slung across my face, breathing deep and even, but I was wide awake. Every sound, every shift in the air, I noticed it all, especially him. Daniel moved in the kitchen like he always did, half clumsy, half graceful, barefoot against the tile and humming tunelessly under his breath. We'd been living together for almost a year now, ever since college ended and both of us found ourselves working in the same city. The idea had come naturally. Why not live together? We already got along, split the same kind of humor, and had years of friendship behind us. What could possibly go wrong? At the time, nothing. But then again, I hadn't expected my feelings to start turning into something heavier, stickier, more difficult to ignore. Daniel was my best friend, straight, confident, charming in a way that made everyone like him effortlessly. He wasn't the type to think twice about walking around shirtless or draping an arm over my shoulders during a movie. He didn't even blink when I came out to him during our senior year. He just said, "Cool, so am I still the best-looking guy you know?" And carried on like nothing had changed. Maybe for him, nothing had. But for me, everything did. So when I moved in with him, I figured I had it under control. I told myself it was just a phase, a lingering crush I could manage as long as I kept things simple. But feelings don't stay quiet forever. They find cracks in your logic, swell when you least expect them, and linger in places like these, quiet apartments on rainy nights, when the sound of his laugh in the other room feels like the only thing keeping you awake. I could hear him now, his footsteps moving closer down the hall, the soft creak of the wooden floor just outside the living room. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe differently. He probably thought I'd already passed out from exhaustion, wrapped in that blanket with the TV mumbling in the background. For a moment, I thought he was just going to walk past and head to his bedroom, like always. But then I heard him pause, not just stop, but linger. His steps faltered, his breath hitched almost imperceptibly, and then I felt it, the shift in the air, the weight of his presence drawing near. I waited, eyes closed, body still, heart racing so loudly I was sure it had to be echoing through the room. The couch dipped slightly under his weight. My mind was screaming, but I didn't move. I didn't know what this was. Maybe he dropped something, maybe he was just adjusting the throw blanket or checking if I was cold. But his hand hovered inches above my arm, fingers twitching like he wanted to touch but didn't quite dare. And then he did. It was subtle, the lightest brush of his fingertips along the inside of my forearm, trailing slow and unsure. My skin came alive under the touch. Contact. My senses fired in ways I hadn't let them in years. I stayed still, unsure if I should pull away or lean in, but then, impossibly, his hand settled there, full and warm, like it belonged. His thumb moved gently, tracing slow arcs against my skin. "God," he whispered, so low I almost thought I imagined it. "Why do you make this so hard?" My breath caught. He didn't know I was awake. He couldn't. I hadn't moved a muscle, hadn't shifted once. I heard him sigh, one of those deep, conflicted sighs that carried weight and confusion. He let go of my arm for a moment, and I thought maybe that was it. Maybe he'd come to his senses and retreat to the safety of his room, pretend nothing had happened. But instead, he shifted closer. I felt the warmth of his body just behind me. I was lying on my side, and he was kneeling at the edge of the couch now, his fingers brushing along the curve of my back. Tentative, but purposeful. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to see the look on his face, to know if this was real or just some late-night confusion wrapped in the comfort of rain and quiet and proximity. But I stayed still, afraid that if I moved, it would all disappear. Daniel let out a small breath, shaky and raw. "I don't know what I'm doing," he murmured. Then, after a pause, "But I know I keep finding excuses to be near you." My chest tightened. He shifted again, and this time his hand came up to touch my hair, brushing a strand off my forehead. His fingers lingered there, and then they moved softly, carefully, tracing the line of my jaw, almost reverently. "I wish I could talk to you about this," he whispered, his voice breaking a little. "But I'm scared that if I do, everything will change, and I don't want to lose what we have." He leaned in. I felt his breath against my cheek, so close. For a second, I thought he might kiss me. My heart pounded so hard it hurt, and then nothing, just stillness. He froze, maybe realizing how close he'd gotten, maybe struggling with himself. His hand dropped back to his lap, and that's when I felt it, his forehead resting gently against the back of my shoulder. Not in a romantic way, not fully, but like he just needed to be near, like he didn't know how to be anywhere else. "I think I feel something," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "But I don't know what to do with it." I lay there motionless, the blanket pulled up to my chin, my body electric and still. I didn't know what to do either. My emotions were a storm, hope, fear, longing, disbelief, crashing against each other all at once. His presence behind me felt grounding and surreal. The quiet hum of the TV filled the silence again, the rain having long since stopped. But inside that room, time felt like it had bent, like we were suspended in some space where nothing else existed but his breath on my skin and the words he didn't dare say aloud. Eventually, Daniel stood. The couch creaked again as the pressure lifted. I heard his footsteps retreat, slower this time, more hesitant. The door to his room opened quietly and clicked shut. Only then did I open my eyes, staring into the darkened corner of the room. My heart still racing, my mind caught in a whirlwind of what just happened. I had no idea what it meant, but I knew one thing for sure. Everything had changed. And I didn't know it back then, but the story was far from over. Something way crazier was still to come. Obviously enough, I didn't sleep that night. Not at all. I stayed curled beneath the blanket, facing the back of the couch, replaying every second of what had just happened. Each word he'd whispered, the hesitant way his fingers had touched me, the warmth of his breath so close to my skin. It was like my body remembered the details even more vividly than my mind, and that memory pulsed through me with every heartbeat. I lay there in the dark, stiff as stone, afraid to move, afraid I might shatter the fragile thread that connected us now. Whatever this was becoming. When I finally moved, the first blue hints of dawn were bleeding into the windows. The apartment was utterly quiet. I sat up slowly, the blanket still wrapped around my shoulders like a second skin, and glanced down the hall. His door was closed, no sounds behind it. I stood, stretching limbs that had gone stiff, and padded softly into the kitchen. I wasn't hungry, but the muscle memory of making coffee kicked in. The warmth of the mug in my hands grounded me, even as my thoughts spiraled in 1,000 directions. Had he meant any of it? Had he been dreaming? Or, worse, did he regret it? The moment had felt so real, too real, but Daniel had never so much as hinted at anything like this before. He'd always been the confident, straight friend, the kind who could joke about anything, who could walk around in nothing but basketball shorts without even thinking twice about it. And I had spent so long learning to bury what I felt around him, learning to interpret every accidental touch or lingering glance as nothing more than the quirks of our friendship. Until last night. Last night didn't feel like a quirk. It felt like something had cracked open inside him, something he'd been holding back. I stood at the kitchen counter, clutching the mug like a lifeline, when I finally heard movement. The soft creak of a mattress, the familiar groan of Daniel's bedroom door opening. My breath caught before I even turned around. And then there he was. Daniel stepped into the room, rubbing the back of his neck, his hair still messy from sleep. He looked at me with a mix of surprise and something unreadable, something that made my pulse skip. "Didn't expect you to be up," he said, his voice raspy from sleep. I shrugged, trying to sound casual, though I could feel the effort in every syllable. "Didn't sleep much?" "Yeah," he replied, crossing to the counter and reaching for a glass, filling it from the tap. "Me neither." Silence settled between us, the kind that usually wasn't uncomfortable but now felt heavy, like it carried too much meaning. I could feel his presence beside me, close, not touching, but near enough to make my skin ache. I glanced over at him. His eyes were fixed on his glass, fingers tapping softly against the side. He didn't look at me, and that avoidance made my stomach twist. "Daniel," I said quietly. He turned toward me then, and for a moment he didn't say anything. His expression flickered, uncertainty, maybe even fear, but beneath it, something softer. He started, then broke off, exhaling a sharp breath. "Listen, if I said anything weird last night—" "You didn't," I interrupted gently. "But you did say something, and I was awake." His eyes snapped up to meet mine. I could see the shift immediately, shock, panic, and then a kind of vulnerability I hadn't seen in him before, like he'd been holding a secret too long and now couldn't stuff it back into the box. He opened his mouth again, but no words came. I waited, giving him space. I wanted to make this easy, but I knew I couldn't speak for him. He had to do this himself. He set the glass down and leaned back against the counter, his eyes still on mine. "I thought you were asleep," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean for any of that to happen." "But it did," I replied, my tone careful, soft but steady. "And you said it." He swallowed hard, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know what's happening to me, man. I don't know what any of this means." I nodded slowly. "Okay. You don't have to have all the answers right now. But you felt something, didn't you? Last night?" He hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Yeah," he said, the word cracking slightly. "Yeah, I did. And I've been feeling it for a while. I didn't want to admit it, especially not to myself." He laughed then, dry and shaky. "I mean, come on. You've known me forever. I've never been into guys, never even thought about it. But lately, I don't know. Every time I look at you, it's like something shifts in my chest, and I can't breathe right." The confession landed between us like a live wire. I could feel the heat rising in my face, a mix of disbelief and overwhelming emotion. He stepped closer, just slightly. "I don't know what to do with this," he continued, his voice lower now. "I keep trying to make it go away, and it doesn't. And then last night you just looked so peaceful, like you were dreaming, and I guess I got caught in it too." I set my coffee mug down slowly and looked up at him. "So, what now?" Daniel shook his head, a helpless smile playing at his lips. "I don't know. I'm still figuring it out, but I know I don't want to pretend like nothing happened. Not anymore." His hand brushed mine, not a grab, not anything overt, just a subtle movement, the back of his fingers grazing my skin, and I didn't move away. "You don't have to have it all figured out today," I said. "We don't have to label anything or rush, but if this is something real, I want to know. I need to know you're not going to run the second it gets hard." "I won't," he said immediately. "I swear, I need time. I need to learn what this means. For me, for us." I nodded again, this time slower. "Okay then, let's start with this. You're not alone. You never have been." His shoulders eased, and something in his posture relaxed for the first time all morning. "Thanks," he said softly, seriously. And then, with no warning, he reached out and pulled me into a hug. It wasn't brief. It wasn't platonic. His arms wrapped around me like he was trying to hold on to something that mattered. His cheek rested against the side of my head, and I leaned into him, breathing in the familiar scent of soap and sleep and the subtle scent of warmth that had always been just Daniel. I didn't know where this was going. I didn't know if it would last or if it would fall apart before we even began. But in that moment, standing barefoot in a kitchen filled with morning light and uncertainty, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. And Daniel, he was holding on just as tightly. His arms stayed around me like they were the only thing holding him upright, and mine clung back without thinking. There was no need to speak. Yet the silence between us wasn't empty. It was full. It buzzed with questions, sure, but also with something deeper, more tender. A quiet acknowledgement that something had changed. That we had crossed an invisible line neither of us could unsee now. When he finally pulled back, it was just enough to look at me. His expression was open, unguarded, and maybe a little afraid. "I don't want to screw this up," he said. "Us. Whatever this is becoming." "You won't," I answered without hesitation. And for a while we didn't move. His hands were still resting on my arms, mine lightly against his waist. We were standing in the middle of our kitchen, the soft hum of the fridge the only sound in the room, sunlight slanting through the blinds. He smiled, a little dazed, like he was still trying to catch up with himself. "I have class soon," he said reluctantly, like he'd just remembered the real world still existed outside this apartment. "But when I get back, we'll talk more," I said. "Figure it out." He nodded, though he lingered longer than necessary, as if stepping away would make all of this dissolve into air. And honestly, I was afraid of that too, afraid that once we walked away from this moment, we'd never find it again. But eventually, he did go. He grabbed his gym bag, threw on a hoodie, and left, throwing me one last look over his shoulder that lingered even after the door closed behind him. I stood there for a long time, fingers still tingling from where they'd touched his skin. My chest felt too full and too empty all at once. The day passed in a haze. I tried to work, but kept getting lost in thoughts of him, the way his voice had cracked when he spoke, the way he'd held me like I was the one thing in the world that could anchor him. I kept hearing his words over and over. "Every time I look at you, it's like something shifts in my chest, and I can't breathe right." By the time he came back, I was a mess of anticipation. He walked through the door in his usual way, keys tossed onto the side table, sneakers kicked off haphazardly. But something in him was different. His posture was uncertain, more deliberate, and he paused when he saw me sitting at the dining table. "Hey," he said, like it was the first time we were speaking. "Hey." He came closer and dropped his bag beside the couch, rubbing the back of his neck. "We should talk. Like, actually talk." I nodded and gestured to the chair across from me. He sat but didn't lean back like he usually would. He sat forward, elbows on his knees, fingers laced together. "I kept thinking about this all day," he began, his voice soft. "And I'm not going to pretend I've got it all figured out now, but I don't want to be afraid of this, of us." I swallowed, heart thudding. "Neither do I," said, my voice steady. "I still don't know what it means," he went on. "I've never felt like this about another guy. It's not like I'm suddenly a different person. I still don't get half the stuff you watch on Netflix. I still drink too much Red Bull and forget to do laundry until it's a crisis. But I look at you and—" He exhaled, shaking his head. "It's like I've been looking for something my whole life without knowing what it was. And then I find it in the way you laugh when you think no one hears you, in the way you cut vegetables like it's a science experiment, and how you know exactly when I'm not okay, even when I'm trying to fake it." My throat tightened. "Daniel." He looked up, eyes locked on mine. "I don't want to go back to pretending. Last night scared me because I didn't mean to say all that stuff, but I did. And the more I think about it, the more I realize I meant every damn word." I reached out across the table and took his hand. He didn't hesitate. His fingers curled around mine like they belonged there. "You don't have to label anything," I said. "You don't even have to understand it all yet. We can take this slow as you need." He let out a laugh, short, but full of emotion. "Slow might kill me." "Not slow," I said with a small smile. "Just honest." The air between us shifted again. There was no longer a wall of uncertainty. There was still plenty of unknown ahead, but it felt like we were facing it together now. He got up and walked around the table, stopping in front of me. His eyes searched mine, like he was asking for permission without speaking the words. And I gave it, simply by not moving, by looking up at him and not looking away. He bent forward slightly and kissed me. It wasn't a long kiss, not like the ones in movies. It was careful, tentative, but real. He pulled back just enough to rest his forehead against mine. "That was okay?" he asked, his voice low. "More than okay," I murmured. We didn't rush into anything else. Not yet. We spent the evening as we always did, ordering takeout, arguing over toppings, half watching a movie while sprawled on the couch. But this time, he sat closer. His thigh brushed mine, his hand rested against my leg, fingers curling just enough to remind me he was there. Every so often, our eyes would meet, and we'd smile, not like friends, but like something more, like people on the edge of something real. But the craziest part of the story was definitely yet to come. He didn't go to his room that night. Instead, when the movie ended and the credits rolled, he looked at me quietly and said, "Can I sleep here? Just be next to you?" I nodded. No teasing, no jokes, just truth. We lay side by side on the pull-out couch, the kind of too small surface that made closeness inevitable. He curled toward me slowly, his arms slipping around my waist, and I let myself lean into him. The warmth of his chest against my back, the even rhythm of his breath, the safety in that stillness. It was a beginning. And somewhere in that quiet, wrapped in each other, we both fell asleep. I woke up with the warmth of his breath against my neck. For a moment, I didn't move. The early morning light was just beginning to stretch its way through the apartment blinds, casting soft golden bands across the couch and the tangled blankets we were wrapped in. I could feel Daniel's arm draped lazily over my waist, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm behind me, and the gentle twitch of his fingers as he stirred in his sleep. For that one suspended second, I allowed myself to just exist there in that stillness, in the peace of having him so close, without pretense or panic. But the moment couldn't last forever. He shifted slowly, waking, and I felt the slightest tension return to his body. His fingers flexed once against my hip, then again like he was trying to decide whether to pull away or stay exactly where he was. "You're awake," he murmured, his voice groggy with sleep, almost a question more than a statement. I nodded, not daring to look back at him just yet. "Have been for a bit." His breath hitched faintly behind me. "I didn't mean to. Well, I guess I did. I just didn't know if that was okay." "It was," I said softly. "It is." He was quiet for a few seconds longer, then let out a slow breath. "Good." Neither of us moved. It was like we were both waiting for a sign, or maybe just trying to hold on to the calm before the tide changed. But even in the stillness, I could feel the shift happening, like something unspoken had finally begun its slow crawl to the surface. And I think he felt it too, because when he finally sat up, stretching his arms above his head and letting the blanket fall away, he didn't look at me right away. He stared down at the floor, lips pressed together, as if his thoughts were louder than anything he could say out loud. "Trying to act like this is normal," he said finally, his voice quiet but clear, "like I'm not lying awake every night thinking about it, about you, about what this means." I sat up beside him, careful not to touch him yet, not wanting to startle the fragile openness between us. "You don't have to have all the answers, Daniel," I said softly. He looked over at me then, his eyes searching mine. "But what if I want to? What if I want to stop feeling like I'm drowning in this silence between us? I know I've been walking around like I'm fine, like everything's under control, but I'm not. I'm barely holding it together. And it's not just because I'm confused. It's because when I'm around you, everything feels clearer and messier at the same time." I didn't know what to say at first. I dreamed of hearing him talk like this, honestly, vulnerably. But now that he was, I realized how much pain he'd been carrying, not because of me, but because of what he'd spent so long denying himself. The freedom to feel, the freedom to want. You don't have to pretend anymore, I said. Not here, not with me. He blinked, his eyes welling slightly, though he quickly looked away. It's not just about being with you, he said, his voice thick. It's about what it means if I am. It means everything I thought I knew about myself changes, and that's terrifying. I nodded slowly. Yeah, but it's also freeing. He let that sit for a while. The morning air between us was still cool, but I could feel the warmth of his nearness again, like gravity was quietly doing its work, pulling us together, making the distance between us smaller, inch by inch. I keep thinking about last night, he said, his voice lower now, about how I almost didn't say anything. I stood outside your room for like 10 minutes before I finally worked up the nerve to open the door, and even then, I only spoke because I thought you were asleep. I smiled faintly. You were very brave for a guy who didn't think anyone was listening. He laughed softly, rubbing the back of his neck. God, that's embarrassing. It wasn't, I said, shaking my head. It was real. He turned toward me fully then, and something in his eyes had changed. The fear was still there, yes, but layered now with something else. Hunger, not just physical, though that too. It was the hunger of someone who had been starving for clarity, for comfort, for closeness, and was finally ready to admit it. I keep thinking about how you looked at me yesterday morning, he said, his voice a little more unsteady now. Like you saw me, the real me, not the version I've been pretending to be. I did, I whispered. I always have. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out and took my hand, threading our fingers together carefully, like he still half expected me to pull away. You make me feel safe, he said. Because you are, I replied. With me, you always are. And in that moment, something broke. Not in a painful way, but like the snap of tension that's been stretched too tight for too long. His shoulders sagged with relief, his brow furrowed and softened all at once, and I knew, without him saying a word, that he'd finally stopped fighting it. He leaned in slowly, not rushed, and I met him halfway. This kiss wasn't careful like the last. It wasn't hesitant or testing. It was slow, deep, and full of everything we hadn't said in words. His hands slid into my hair, mine pressed flat against his chest, and our mouths moved together like they'd been waiting for this moment longer than either of us could admit. When we finally pulled apart, we didn't let go. Daniel rested his forehead against mine, breath uneven. I've never felt like this before, he said, his voice a husky whisper. Not with anyone. It scares the hell out of me. I know, I said softly, but you don't have to do this alone. His fingers gripped mine tighter. Promise? I nodded. I'm not going anywhere. And neither was he. Because this was no longer just confusion or curiosity. It wasn't just the accidental slip of a secret whispered into the dark. This was something real now. Fragile, yes, but burning steady between us like a new light in a room we'd spent too long tiptoeing through in the dark. We stayed like that for a while, leaning into each other, letting the quiet wrap around us, not as a barrier, but as something warm, something safe, something shared. What came next, we both knew, was no longer a matter of if, but when, and that when was closer than we realized. The apartment was quiet again by the time Daniel stood up and tugged me gently to my feet with him. He didn't say anything as he led me toward the bedroom, but he didn't need to. His hand stayed wrapped around mine the whole way, warm and steady, like he was grounding himself in something solid, maybe in me, maybe in the truth we'd both finally stopped running from. The moment we stepped inside, he paused, turning to look at me fully. The early light still spilled in through the half-open blinds, painting soft streaks of gold across the room. It made everything feel gentler, slower, like we were suspended in some other time, some other version of reality where nothing outside this moment mattered. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be, but no less sincere. He nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. "I've never been more sure of anything." I could see the nervousness still lingering beneath his calm, his shoulders just a little too tight, his breath a touch too shallow. But it wasn't the kind of fear that made people run. It was the kind that made people tremble on the edge of something they wanted more than they were ready to admit. He stepped closer and placed his hand on my chest, right over where my heart thudded, hard and fast. "You feel that?" he whispered. I nodded. "That's how I've been feeling every time you looked at me this past month, every time you walked into a room, every time I tried to ignore what I already knew." His fingers curled against the fabric of my shirt, and then, slowly, carefully, he leaned in. The kiss this time was different, not hesitant, not testing. It was a surrender, not to weakness, but to truth. His lips were warm and steady, moving against mine with an intensity that left no space for questions or doubt. I felt him exhale through his nose, like kissing me was some kind of release, like letting go of everything he'd been holding back. His hands moved to my waist, not tentative now, but secure, pulling me closer until our bodies pressed fully together. I reached up, letting my fingers tangle in his hair, tugging just slightly until he let out a quiet sound, half gasp, half groan, that sent heat racing through me. When we finally broke apart for air, our foreheads rested together. I could feel his breath on my skin, his fingers trembling slightly as they grazed my cheek. He was still holding me tight against his hips, like he couldn't let go, like he didn't want to. "I've wanted this," he said softly, voice rough now, long before I even understood why. "You don't have to explain," I murmured, brushing a thumb gently across his cheekbone. "You're here. That's enough." Something in those words cracked him open. His arms slid around me fully, pulling me close, his lips finding the corner of my jaw, then the base of my neck. Like he couldn't stop himself. There was no performance in it, no hesitation, just raw, honest need, a hunger to be close, to feel everything now that he'd finally let himself feel anything. We tumbled backward onto the bed, not with urgency, but with intention. Every touch was deliberate, every kiss unhurried. There was reverence in the way he moved, like he was trying to memorize me, the shape of my body, the sound of my breath, the way my fingers trailed down his spine. And I returned every touch with the same care, the same wonder, like we were rediscovering each other in a new light. Our clothes slipped away between kisses and soft laughter, clumsy, tender, real. He whispered my name against my skin like it was the only word that still made sense, and I held him like I never wanted to let him go. There was no script, no roadmap, just us learning the rhythm of each other's bodies and hearts. I watched his expression shift with every new sensation, every inch of skin explored. And when our eyes met again, there was no fear left in them, only awe, only trust.